The House is going to shut down on Thursday. We're not coming back till Monday. And somehow or another, for the members who want to offer at least some amendments to this, you have to do it by 5 o'clock on Friday.
Do you realize that under this current process that all of our staffs and everybody else are going to miss their Easter holidays?
You limited the ability of certain members to participate.
With fewer than 40 days left in the session, every moment matters. Accusations and scheduling conflicts over the Easter holiday weekend only add to mounting tensions in this once-a-decade debate. Self-preservation or doing what's best for voters? It's all ahead next, live on Session 11.
From KXAN Austin News, this is Session 11, live interactive breakdowns, insights, interviews, and our weekly roundtable discussion. You're watching Session 11 on KXAN Austin News.
When we go through the process next week, hopefully at the end of the day, the House will feel pretty good about voting out a map. If they don't, they don't, and then we'll end up going to legislative redistricting board, and they'll decide what some of these members' districts look like, and those members may not have much to say about it. They have more to say about it on the House floor.
Good morning. I'm Robert Hadlock. Thank you for joining us here for Session 11. That was State Representative Bert Solomons, the House redistricting chair. Members pull him in 150 different directions, plotting a statewide map to impact your vote for the next 10 years. Right now, our political reporter Josh Hinkle tells you how you can interact with us this morning on our program. Josh?
Good morning, Robert. It's all about the process some say overshadows our state's financial challenges, like a $27 billion budget shortfall. Our On Politics poll asks, is redistricting distracting lawmakers from the budget? Log on to KXAN.com and let us know what you think. And while you're there, click on the On Politics tab at the top. You'll go straight to our special political site where you can check out my latest blog post. Plus, click the blue bar at the top to chat with us this morning. It's redistricting and the budget crisis. Our On Politics panel will field your questions a little later in the program. We've got a great On Politics panel today, Robert. I think you will enjoy the budget talk.
Well, as will our viewers. Thank you, Josh. Well, with House redistricting hitting the floor on Wednesday, as members grapple with changes to what's proposed, Travis County now has 6 House districts, 5 Democratic and 1 Republican. Under the new map, all incumbents appear to be safe. The big changes are Democrat Donna Howard's House District 48 losing a lot of land, but giving her more of a voter advantage. And in House District 47, Republican Paul Workman takes over the entire western side of Travis County. Looking north to Williamson County, a big population boom there, of course. Right now it has 2 House districts. Under the plan, there's a third with 1 district set aside for the entire city of Round Rock. Our newsmakers are Central Texas lawmakers in some of those districts. First-term Republican House member Larry Gonzalez of Round Rock worked on a map to reunite fragmented cities, and he joins us with his own, with some major landmarks. Democrat Mark Strama of Austin took himself out of the redistricting process altogether. He says lawmakers' map making is a conflict of interest, and that decision should go to an outside independent commission. Here is Josh speaking with both men here in our studio.
Guys who are in swing districts and therefore have a generally centrist record. They're the ones who are vulnerable in those surge elections, even though they're the ones, frankly, who probably better reflect the will of the majority of American voters who want us to have a centrist governing coalition. The guys who survive even those tidal wave elections like the ones we saw in 08 and 010 are the guys who are in districts that are so overwhelmingly stacked for their political party that they survive no matter what. And those are the ones who pull the political system toward the extremes.
I know when you look at HC 52 and compare the 08 numbers to the 10 numbers, there's a huge swing amongst those that had voted Democrat and those that came over to vote for me in 10. Now, I can tell you that a large part of that was the decisions made and the policies made by the person before me. That's, you can't argue what that looks like. When the Democrat Party chairman resigns his position and endorses me because he says the conservative Texas Democrats are gone, We're being led by a progressive nationalist Democrat party, and we in Texas, Democrats in Texas, Williamson County, they've left us. When he does that, and you see a huge swing in that area of Williamson County, that's a philosophical change the voters have had. That's something they're looking at, and they're realizing, wait a minute, where do we now lie? Not R versus D. That's just a conservative thing.
But you're making my point, because that's in a district that had gone from R to D just 2 years earlier. So that it would go to D to R 2 years later is exactly my point. Folks in the center are the ones who are always at the whim of these surge election years. Yours was a swing district,
I don't know that you would call
twice in 2 years.
I don't know if you would call the incumbents that were there moderate or swing. I mean,
maybe
the incumbents
not,
that were there,
but the voters
were not in the middle.
but the point is, the voters are, and the voters swung that district twice in 2 years. That's not surprising. That happens in districts like that. It is less likely to happen after we adopt a map that makes your district a 60% Republican district, because the Democratic voters in your district have less of a voice with their elected official, because they have less of a capability, even in a surge year, after this map is adopted, of taking you out of office. I think you do a great job for your district. But there's no question in my mind that this whole process is set up for each incumbent to have a safer district when the process is over than they had before. That's what redistricting is. That's not what it's for. And there are other laws that circumscribe the ability of politicians to just crassly perpetuate themselves in political office, as like the Voting Rights Act. But for the most part, that's how politicians view the redistricting process, and that's what they're sitting around drawing maps to try to do.
Well, because we're constitutionally told to do so. I mean,
we're not constitutionally told to do that.
How do you?
We're constitutionally told to redraw them.
To redraw them, yeah.
And then it becomes an exercise in self-preservation.
But we have been constitutionally told to redraw the maps, and I think what we did in Williamson County was improve upon what was filed.
Agreed.
What we did in
but
Williamson
maybe
County,
not upon what was there before. If you're from the perspective of Democratic voters in Williamson County.
Well, I don't know. When you look at
which there are some.
Well, there are some, absolutely. But when you look at you know, this past election, you know, 57.5 kind of number, that's very different than a previous, you know, 48.9 number, as far as what the Republican candidates received. Again, when you look at the voters of HD 52, Williamson County, as an example, 57.5% is a huge shift. It's a fundamental, I believe, a fundamental philosophical shift in what they were looking at and what they had seen the previous 2 years than it was candidate-based, than it was lines. It simply wasn't lines that changed that. It wasn't lines that moved 10 points.
Right,
there was
but
a
if they shift again 2 years from now, which having shifted 2 years previously is eminently possible, you'd have to concede, now the lines make it very much harder for that shift to depose an incumbent. That's the whole point.
And there's also a loss of population. That is, you can't argue has to exist when you've got to shed 50,
That's right, but what you're going to
people.
calculatedly do is lose as much of the population that might defeat you in the next election. I'm not criticizing you for it. This is the process we have. But that's what every politician is doing with the redistricting process right now, trying to shift out of their district the voters likely to vote against them. One of the things that people expected to happen with this redistricting was that this would be the first decade when the power in the Texas House shifted from rural to urban and suburban. So, and the reason is that population has moved from rural to urban and suburban. But maybe you understand this dynamic better than I do. I don't see that in the map, because the pairings are in the rural, are not in the rural districts for the most part. There's, I think, one. I think Land Troop is Land Troop paired.
There's a rural West Texas. There is a Northeast Texas, but the other pairings become
urban. They're in Dallas and Houston.
Because here's the shift. The shift in population wasn't just rural to suburban. Yeah. It was urban to suburban.
Yeah.
If you look at the
it's
map,
interesting.
It's fascinating.
It's not what we thought it was going to be. Now, I don't know if that could have been drawn differently, right? And if maybe what's going on is rural still has so much power in the current legislature that they've managed to figure out a way to draw maps that don't pair all the rural members against each other. But given that there's been so much population shift out of rural Texas, you would have thought all the rural members would be facing really tough redistricting challenges, and in fact, they don't seem to have had that difficult a time avoiding cannibalizing each other. And the greater pain seems to be in the urban areas because of that shift to suburban. You don't have to have lost population to lose representation. If you've grown, but grown less than the rest of the state, you lose representation. Travis County has grown incredibly fast over the last decade, but only consistent with the state average growth. Right. So we didn't gain any new representation. So it's been surprising what the growth dynamics have done to the shift in power geographically. Dallas County losing maybe two districts.
That's right, 2 districts.
I find pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Harris County losing 1, but arguably they should be, I've heard it argued that they should be losing 2. You know, these are things that affect the power in the legislature in a way that doesn't affect partisan balance, but that does affect sort of how we make policy, because, you know, it's been very, policy has been profoundly affected by the number of rural legislators in the Texas House for a long time. And now the shift is so much towards suburban representation. I think it's frankly going to create a stronger mandate for public education in the future legislatures, because those are folks who are moving into the suburbs in order to get into suburban school districts, and they're going to be champions for public education. They're going to force their elected representatives to be champions for public education. I think it'll probably have some other policy consequences that are hard to anticipate at this point.
Yeah, and another thing too, just look at Williamson County, the growth was so much that it used to be Williamson and Milam shared, so 2 counties, 2 state reps. There is enough population in Williamson County now for 2.6 seats. I mean, so you're seeing this huge shift now where you're going to have, you know, Williamson County having, you know, almost 3 state reps coming from Williamson County. But that's the shift that we talked about coming into the suburbs.
Well, there's 20 more minutes of that interview where that came from. We have the entire thing posted on our websites, kxan.com and onpolitics.com. But House districts are just part of the battle ahead in this session.
So there's no doubt that they're very eager to see my departure.
Many say he's in the most trouble for congressional redistricting here in Texas. Lloyd Doggett reveals a major prediction for Travis County when Session 11 returns.